This, this is the $1 billion jackpot ticket. The words echoed in a stunned silence, as a room full of onlookers realized the woman they dismissed was no ordinary claimant. Welcome, everyone. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. Maybe Charlotte, New York, or halfway across the globe. What do you think happens when a billion-dollar winner faces prejudice at the moment of her triumph? Will she crumble, or will she rise to change the world? Stick with us to find out. This gripping tale of resilience and redemption will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss a second. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell to catch our latest stories. Share this video, comment your predictions, and join us as we unravel a journey that's as inspiring as it is shocking. Let's dive in. The air inside the North Carolina State Lottery Payment Center in Charlotte was thick with a restless hum, a cocktail of hope and desperation that clung to the polished marble floors and soared up to the high glass ceiling. The center, a sleek fortress of bureaucracy, pulsed with the dreams of countless ticket holders, each one praying their numbers would rewrite their fate. On this sweltering afternoon, the sun blazed through towering windows, casting stark shadows across the room, as if the light itself were interrogating every soul within. Amid this charged atmosphere, Uzoamaka Okoye stepped through the heavy glass doors, her presence a quiet thunderclap in a space too distracted to notice. Uzo was a vision, her deep brown skin radiant under the harsh fluorescent glow, her beauty both striking and unpretentious. Her tailored navy blazer hugged her frame with understated elegance, its crisp lines offset by the scuffed simplicity of her black flats. In her hand, she clutched a single lottery ticket, its edges worn from nervous handling, a fragile slip of paper that held the promise of a $1 billion jackpot. Her heart thrummed a wild rhythm, but her face betrayed none of it. Years of navigating rooms where she was underestimated had taught her the art of composure. Her dark eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the bustling lobby, taking in the long queues, the murmured conversations, and the faint clatter of keyboards. This was her moment, yet the weight of it felt both exhilarating and precarious, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind at her back. She moved with purpose, her steps measured but confident, weaving through the crowd toward the main counter. The lobby was a study in contrast, wealth and want, hope and resignation, all mingling under the sterile gaze of security cameras. A man in a rumpled jacket clutched a crumpled ticket, muttering numbers to himself. A woman in a designer coat tapped her foot impatiently, her diamond earrings glinting with every turn of her head. Uzo, though, stood apart, not because of ostentation, but because of the quiet authority she carried, a presence that demanded respect even if it went unseen. Her modest attire, chosen with care, spoke of professionalism, but it was her poise that made her unforgettable, a beacon in a sea of distraction. At the counter, Penelope Penny Whitaker sat enthroned behind a sleek desk, her blonde hair pinned in a flawless updo, her crisp white blouse a stark contrast to the chaos around her. Her name tag gleamed under the lights, a badge of her dominion in this small kingdom of paperwork and power. Penny's fingers danced across her keyboard, her eyes glued to the computer screen, her lips set in a tight line of practiced indifference. She was the gatekeeper, the first hurdle between dreamers and their dreams, and she wielded her authority with a cold precision that bordered on disdain. Uzo approached, her ticket and ID ready, her posture straight but open, expecting the basic courtesy of acknowledgement. She stood patiently, her gaze fixed on Penny, waiting for the flicker of recognition that never came. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The hum of the lobby faded, replaced by the faint tap-tap of Penny's manicured nails on the keys, each stroke a deliberate dismissal. Uzo's presence, so vivid and undeniable, seemed to dissolve in the clerk's willful blindness. The silence between them grew heavy, a tangible weight that pressed against Uzo's chest. She shifted slightly, her flats whispering against the marble. But Penny's eyes remained locked on her screen, as if Uzo were a ghost, a shadow too inconsequential to notice. The rebuff was subtle yet cutting, a microcosm of countless slights Uzo had endured. Moments when her worth was measured not by her character, but by the assumptions others projected onto her skin, her clothes, her very existence. "Hello," Uzo said at last, her voice soft but clear, a gentle ripple in the stagnant air. It was a simple greeting, laced with warmth and expectation, but it landed like a pebble in a still pond, unheeded. Penny's fingers paused for a fraction of a second, her brow twitching almost imperceptibly, but her gaze stayed fixed, her silence a wall. Uzo's pulse quickened, a spark of indignation flaring in her chest, but she tamped it down, her years of resilience a shield against such slights. She waited, her eyes never leaving Penny, willing the clerk to meet her gaze, to acknowledge her humanity. 1 second. 2. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, a quiet battle of wills in a room too busy to care. Just then, a white man in a pressed gray suit approached the adjacent counter, his briefcase swinging confidently at his side. Penny's demeanor transformed in an instant, as if a switch had been flipped. Her lips curved into a radiant smile, her eyes lighting up with an eagerness that bordered on theatrical. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I assist you today?" she chirped, rising from her seat with a grace reserved for those deemed worthy. Her voice was honeyed, her posture welcoming, a stark contrast to the icy void she'd offered Uzo. The man nodded, launching into a casual explanation of his claim, and Penny leaned in, hanging on his every word, her laughter soft and accommodating. Uzo's chest tightened, the disparity in treatment a blade against her pride. The lobby's hum seemed to fade, the world narrowing to this moment of exclusion, this deliberate erasure. She glanced around, wondering if anyone else had noticed. The man with the crumpled ticket, the woman with the diamond earrings. But their eyes were elsewhere, their own dreams consuming their attention. Uzo was alone in this quiet indignity, a woman of extraordinary worth rendered invisible by a clerk's casual prejudice. Yet she stood her ground, her ticket clutched tightly, her resolve unshaken. This was not the first time she'd been dismissed, nor would it be the last. But Uzoamaka Okoye was no stranger to battles fought in silence. She smoothed the lapel of her blazer, her fingers steady, and prepared to speak again, knowing that her voice, however soft, would not be silenced. The center buzzed on, oblivious to the storm brewing at its heart. Uzo's ticket, a billion-dollar promise, lay dormant in her hand, its power unrecognized by those too blind to see her. But in that moment, as she stood tall against the weight of dismissal, Uzo felt the first stirrings of a fire that would soon blaze beyond these walls, a fire that would challenge prejudice, demand respect, and reshape the world in ways no one in that lobby could yet imagine. The North Carolina State Lottery Payment Center thrummed with a restless pulse, its marble floors reflecting the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Uzo Okoye stood at the counter, her navy blazer crisp despite the heat, her black flats planted firmly on the ground. In her hand, the $1 billion lottery ticket felt like a live wire, its promise crackling beneath her steady grip. She had spoken, her voice soft, deliberate, cutting through the lobby's hum. Yet Penelope Penny Whitaker, the clerk, had dismissed her with a curt gesture, pointing her to another station. Uzo's chest still burned from the slight, but she moved with grace, her resolve a quiet armor. The eyes of the crowd, distracted by their own hopes, slid past her, but she felt their weight, an invisible judgment that prickled her skin. At the new counter, Uzo waited, her posture erect, her dark eyes scanning the room. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and anticipation, the murmur of voices weaving a tapestry of dreams and desperation. A man in a faded cap shuffled nearby, clutching a dog-eared ticket. A woman in a silk scarf tapped her nails, her impatience a sharp rhythm. Uzo, though, was a still point in the chaos, her beauty radiant yet understated, her presence commanding respect even as it went unnoticed. She smoothed her blazer, her fingers brushing the worn edges of the ticket, and steeled herself. This was her moment, and no clerk's disdain would steal it. When her turn came, Uzo stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She placed her ID and the lottery ticket on the counter with care, the plastic and paper aligning perfectly, a silent assertion of her right to be there. Penny approached, her blonde updo gleaming under the lights, her white blouse a stark emblem of authority. Her name tag glinted, a small crown in this kingdom of bureaucracy. Uzo met her gaze, expecting professionalism, but Penny's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing in a thin line of suspicion. She snatched the ID, holding it between thumb and forefinger as if it were tainted, her scrutiny a performance for an audience of one. Uzo's pulse quickened, but her face remained serene, a mask honed by years of navigating such slights. Penny turned the ID over, her gaze flicking between it and Uzo's face, as if searching for a lie in the curve of her cheekbones or the depth of her brown eyes. The silence stretched, taut and oppressive, the lobby's hum fading to a distant drone. Then, with a flick of her wrist, Penny tossed the ID onto the tiled floor. The plastic clattered, a harsh, deliberate sound that sliced through the room like a blade. It skidded to a stop near Uzo's feet, a discarded relic of her identity. The air seemed to freeze, the moment crystallizing in a suffocating stillness. All eyes turned, briefly, guiltily, before darting away. The man with the faded cap shifted uncomfortably. The woman with the scarf glanced up, then down. No one spoke. No one intervened. Uzo felt a surge of anger, hot and molten, rising in her chest. It clawed at her throat, urging her to lash out, to demand the respect she deserved. But she swallowed it, her discipline a steel cage around her emotions. Slowly, gracefully, she bent to retrieve the ID, her movements measured, each gesture a defiance of Penny's cruelty. Her fingers closed around the plastic, cool against her palm, and she rose, her eyes locking with Penny's. The clerk's face was a mask of indifference, no trace of remorse in her cold blue stare. But Uzo's gaze burned with a silent challenge, a promise that this moment would not define her. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension a living thing, coiling tighter with each passing second. Uzo straightened, her dignity intact, and placed the ticket back on the counter. "Please verify this," she said, her voice unwavering, each word a deliberate strike against the clerk's disdain. The simplicity of her request belied the storm within her, a tempest of indignation, pride, and unyielding resolve. Penny's lips twitched, a smirk threatening to break through, but she said nothing, her silence a weapon as sharp as her earlier act. The crowd's eyes lingered now, curious, judgmental, their whispers a faint undercurrent. Uzo felt their scrutiny, a thousand needles pricking her skin, but she stood tall, her poise a shield against their apathy. Penny's gaze flicked to the ticket, her skepticism a palpable force. She picked it up with exaggerated care, holding it to the light as if it were a forgery, her movements slow and theatrical. Uzo watched, her jaw tight, her hands clasped to keep them from trembling. The clerk's disdain was a performance, a power play meant to diminish, to reduce Uzo to an intruder in a space where she belonged. Yet Uzo refused to shrink. Her beauty, her strength, her very presence were a rebuke to Penny's prejudice, a living testament to her worth. The ticket, that fragile slip of paper, was more than a prize. It was a symbol of her triumph, a truth Penny could not erase. The lobby buzzed on, its rhythm unbroken by the drama at the counter. The man in the cap muttered to himself. The woman in the scarf checked her watch, their worlds untouched by Uzo's humiliation. But for Uzo, this moment was a crucible, a test of her resilience in the face of casual cruelty. She stood her ground, her eyes never leaving Penny, her heart pounding with a fierce determination. This was not just about a ticket, not just about $1 billion. It was about her right to be seen, to be respected, to claim what was hers without apology. As Penny's fingers hovered over the ticket, Uzo felt a fire kindling within her, a spark that would soon blaze beyond this moment, this counter, this room. She was Uzoamaka Okoye, and she would not be erased. The North Carolina State Lottery Payment Center buzzed with a restless undercurrent, its marble expanse a cold stage for dreams and disappointments. Uzo Okoye stood at the counter, her navy blazer a quiet testament to her resolve, her black flats rooted to the floor. The $1 billion lottery ticket lay before her, its worn edges a silent witness to her claim, now tainted by the sting of humiliation. Her ID, moments ago flung to the floor by the clerk, Penelope Penny Whitaker, rested in her hand, its plastic edges warm from her grip. Uzo's voice had cut through the stifling silence. "Please verify this." Her words a steel-clad demand, unshaken by Penny's smirk or the room's judgmental eyes. The air crackled with tension, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point, as the lobby's hum seemed to pause, waiting for the next act in this unspoken drama. Penny leaned back, her blonde updo catching the fluorescent glare, her white blouse pristine, yet somehow diminished by her disdain. She held the ticket aloft, her fingers pinching it as if it were a suspect relic, her eyes glinting with mockery. "What do you think of this?" she murmured, turning to her colleague Rachel, who lounged nearby, her arms crossed, her lips curled in amused complicity. The words were loud enough to carry, a deliberate barb meant to wound. "Looks like another fake to me," Penny added, her voice dripping with sarcasm, each syllable a calculated slight. Rachel's chuckle was sharp, a dagger in the quiet, her gaze flicking to Uzo's modest attire, her unbranded blazer, her scuffed shoes, as if they were evidence of fraud. "Yeah, you can't be too careful these days," Rachel replied, her tone light but venomous, her eyes dancing with shared contempt. Uzo's jaw tightened, the heat of indignation rising in her chest like a tide. Her fingers twitched, itching to clench into fists, but she kept them still, her discipline a fortress against the clerk's cruelty. The crowd's whispers grew, a soft rustle of curiosity and judgment, their glances darting to Uzo, then away, as if her presence were a spectacle too uncomfortable to acknowledge. She felt their eyes, probing, dismissive, yet she stood taller, her beauty a radiant defiance, her deep brown skin glowing under the harsh lights. This was no longer just about a ticket. It was a battle for her dignity, a stand against the prejudice that sought to erase her. Her heart pounded, but her gaze remained locked on Penny, unwavering, a silent vow that she would not be diminished. "This is a legitimate ticket," Uzo said, her voice sharp yet controlled, each word a hammer striking stone. "Verify it in your system." The command was unyielding, a challenge that sliced through Penny's mockery like a blade. The clerk blinked, momentarily thrown by Uzo's resolve, her smirk faltering for a heartbeat before she recovered, her eyes narrowing. She leaned forward, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, but her movements were slow, deliberate, a performance of reluctance meant to prolong Uzo's discomfort. The screen's glow illuminated Penny's face, casting shadows that deepened her sneer, as if the machine itself were complicit in her disdain. The room seemed to lean in, the tension a living thing, coiling tighter with each tap of the keys. Rachel shifted, her amusement fading into something harder, her eyes flicking between Penny and Uzo. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a low hum of speculation, but no one stepped forward, their silence a tacit endorsement of the clerk's behavior. Uzo felt the weight of their apathy, a thousand invisible chains, yet she refused to bend. Her beauty, her strength, her very presence were a rebuke to their prejudice, a beacon in a room dimmed by bias. She stood as if carved from stone, her poise a shield, her ticket a sword she would not relinquish. The seconds stretched, each one a test of her endurance. But Uzo was no stranger to such trials. She had faced dismissal before, and she would face it again, but never without a fight. The tension shattered as a new figure emerged from the shadows of a back office, his footsteps sharp against the marble. Daniel Harper, the center director, cut an imposing figure in his charcoal suit, his name tag glinting with authority. His brow furrowed, sensing the charged air, his eyes sweeping the scene like a hawk. The crowd parted subtly, their whispers fading, as if his presence demanded order. "What's going on here, Penny?" he asked, his voice low but commanding, a rumble that silenced the room. Penny's demeanor shifted in an instant, her smirk vanishing, her posture straightening as if caught in a spotlight. Her voice softened, a practiced deference replacing her earlier scorn. "This customer claims she has a winning ticket," she said, her tone smooth but edged with doubt. "But I'm not convinced. The ID and ticket don't seem trustworthy." She cast a pointed glance at Uzo, her words a veiled accusation, her eyes daring the director to agree. Uzo's pulse surged, but her expression remained serene, her dignity a fortress unbreached. She felt the crowd's eyes shift, their curiosity now tinged with anticipation, as if sensing a reckoning. Daniel's gaze flicked to Uzo, his expression unreadable, then back to Penny. "Is that so?" he said, his tone neutral but heavy with scrutiny. He stepped closer, his presence a counterweight to Penny's malice, his authority a sudden pivot in the room's dynamic. Uzo met his eyes, her gaze steady, a silent plea for fairness in a space that had offered her none. The ticket lay on the counter, its promise hanging in the balance, a fragile thread in a moment that could unravel her dreams or forge her triumph. Penny hesitated, her fingers stilling on the keyboard, her confidence wavering under Daniel's scrutiny. Rachel's smirk faded, her arms uncrossing as she sensed the shift. The lobby's hum seemed to falter, the air thick with expectation, as if the walls themselves awaited the outcome. Uzo stood at the center of it all, her heart a drumbeat, her resolve a fire that burned brighter with each slight. This was her stand, her moment to demand the respect she deserved, and she would not yield. As Daniel reached for the ticket, his fingers brushing its edge, Uzo felt a spark of hope, a flicker that this confrontation might yet turn the tide in her favor. The North Carolina State Lottery Payment Center seemed to hold its breath, its marble vastness a silent amphitheater for the drama unfolding at the counter. Uzoamaka Okoye stood resolute, her navy blazer a quiet armor, her black flats anchored to the floor like roots of an ancient tree. The $1 billion lottery ticket lay exposed on the counter, its worn edges a testament to her claim, now caught in the crucible of scrutiny. Her ID, reclaimed with dignity after its humiliating descent to the floor, rested in her hand, a symbol of her unyielding presence. The air was thick with tension, a storm gathering in the stillness, as Daniel Harper, the center director, stood poised over the ticket, his charcoal suit a stark contrast to the fluorescent glare. His question to Penelope, Penny Whitaker, "Is that so?" hung like a guillotine, its weight pressing against the clerk's faltering confidence. Penny's blonde updo caught the light, but her earlier swagger had crumbled under Daniel's piercing gaze. Her white blouse, once a badge of authority, now seemed a flimsy shield against the truth. She shifted, her fingers twitching over the keyboard, her eyes darting to Rachel, who stood frozen, her smirk replaced by a flicker of unease. The crowd's murmurs swelled, a restless tide of curiosity, their eyes flicking between Uzo and the director, sensing a reckoning. Uzo's heart thundered, but her face was a mask of serene defiance, her deep brown skin glowing with a radiance that defied the room's cold judgment. She had demanded verification, her voice a blade of certainty, and now the moment teetered on the edge of vindication or further dismissal. Daniel's hand closed around the ticket, his fingers steady but deliberate, as if handling a relic of immense power. He turned to Uzo, his expression unreadable, a judge weighing evidence in a trial of unspoken biases. "May I have your ID again, please?" he asked, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the lobby's hum like a bell. Uzo met his gaze, her eyes unwavering, and handed over the ID, its plastic surface warm from her grip. The gesture was simple, yet it carried the weight of her resolve, a silent assertion of her right to be seen. Daniel took it, his fingers brushing hers briefly, and turned to the computer, his movements precise, almost ceremonial. The crowd leaned in, their whispers fading, as if the room itself awaited the verdict. The screen's glow bathed Daniel's face, casting shadows that deepened the furrows in his brow. He scanned the ID, his eyes flicking between the plastic and the monitor, then entered the ticket's numbers with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Each keystroke echoed in the silence, a heartbeat in the room's held breath. Penny stood rigid, her lips parted, her earlier mockery now a ghost haunting her expression. Rachel's arms dropped to her sides, her amusement extinguished, her eyes fixed on the screen as if it might betray her complicity. Uzo stood tall, her poise a beacon, her beauty a quiet rebellion against the prejudice that sought to diminish her. The seconds stretched, each one a test of her endurance, but she was forged in such moments, her strength a fire that burned brighter under pressure. The screen flashed, a sudden burst of light that seemed to ripple through the room. Daniel's eyes widened, his breath catching, and he leaned closer, as if the numbers might vanish. "This," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "this is the $1 billion jackpot ticket." The words landed like a thunderclap, shattering the tension, reverberating off the marble walls. He turned to Uso, his gaze shifting from scrutiny to astonishment, then to something akin to respect. "And her ID matches perfectly," he added, his tone firm, as if anchoring the truth against the room's disbelief. The crowd erupted in murmurs, a wave of shock and awe, their eyes now locked on Uzo, seeing her for the first time. Penny's face drained of color, her arrogance collapsing like a house of cards. Her hands trembled, clutching the counter for support, her eyes darting to Rachel, who stared at the floor, her complicity exposed. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a chorus of astonishment, their earlier apathy replaced by a grudging fascination. Uzo stood unmoved, her expression serene, but her eyes blazing with quiet triumph. The ticket, that fragile slip of paper, was no longer just a prize. It was her vindication, a truth that no clerk's disdain could erase. Yet the sting of humiliation lingered, a shadow beneath her victory, fueling a resolve that burned hotter than ever. Daniel's expression hardened as he turned to Penny, his voice low but laced with steel. "You dismissed a $1 billion winner based on what? Your assumptions?" He shook his head, his disappointment a palpable force. "This is unacceptable. You'll face consequences for this, up to and including termination." The words cut through the room, a sentence delivered with finality. Penny's lips quivered, but she said nothing, her silence a confession of guilt. Rachel shifted, her face pale, her earlier laughter now a bitter memory. The crowd's murmurs softened, their eyes flicking to Penny, then back to Uzo, as if reassessing the woman they'd overlooked. Uzo's chest rose with a deep breath, her composure unshaken, her dignity a fortress unbreached. "I'm not here for apologies," she said to Daniel, her voice clear and resolute, each word a declaration of her worth. "I'm here to claim what's mine, and to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Her words were a gauntlet thrown, a challenge to the system that had allowed such prejudice to fester. Daniel nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes, and turned to process her claim, his fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard, ensuring the $1 billion was secured in her account. The lobby buzzed with renewed energy, the crowd's whispers now a tapestry of awe and speculation. Uzo stood at the center, her beauty radiant, her strength undeniable, a woman who had turned humiliation into triumph. The ticket was hers, the prize was hers, but more than that, this moment was hers. A victory not just over Penny's cruelty, but over every silent slight she'd ever endured. As Daniel handed her the confirmation, his nod a silent acknowledgement, Uso felt a spark ignite within her, a fire that would soon blaze beyond these walls, demanding respect and reshaping the world in its wake. The North Carolina State Lottery Payment Center faded into a distant memory, its marble halls and fluorescent glare, no longer the stage for Uzo Okoye's story. The $1 billion jackpot, now securely hers, was not merely a windfall, but a catalyst, a spark that ignited a fire within her to reshape the world that had tried to diminish her. Uzo stepped into the bustling streets of Charlotte, her navy blazer replaced by a tailored charcoal suit, her black flats traded for polished heels that clicked with purpose against the pavement. Her deep brown skin glowed under the city's golden light, her beauty a quiet force, her eyes alight with a vision that stretched far beyond personal triumph. The humiliation she'd endured at the hands of Penelope Penny Whitaker and her colleague Rachel was a wound, but it was also a forge, tempering her resolve into something unbreakable, a mission to ensure no one else would face such indignity. In the wake of her victory, the Lottery Center quaked with repercussions. Daniel Harper, the center director, launched a relentless investigation, his charcoal suit a constant presence in the corridors as he pored over security footage. The grainy images captured Penny's contemptuous toss of Uzo's ID, her mocking words to Rachel, and Rachel's complicit laughter, each frame a damning indictment. The footage played on a loop in a closed-door meeting, the screen's glow illuminating the pale faces of the staff. Penny, once cloaked in arrogance, sat trembling, her blonde updo unraveling, her white blouse creased with defeat. Her excuses crumbled under Daniel's steely gaze, and by day's end, she was terminated, her name tag stripped from her desk, her departure a silent exodus through the back door. Rachel, her amusement now a bitter regret, faced indefinite suspension, her fate tethered to mandatory bias training that would force her to confront the prejudice she'd so casually wielded. The center itself transformed under Daniel's iron resolve. He stood before a hushed staff, his voice a low thunder, declaring a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Mandatory diversity workshops swept through the offices, led by experts who dissected unconscious bias with surgical precision. New oversight protocols emerged, with cameras and complaint systems ensuring no clerk could dismiss a claimant without scrutiny. The lobby, once a cold gauntlet for dreamers, now hummed with a cautious professionalism, each interaction tinged with the weight of accountability. Daniel, haunted by the center's failure, walked the halls with a renewed purpose, his name tag a badge of reform, his reforms a tribute to the woman whose dignity had exposed their flaws. But Uzo's gaze was fixed on a horizon far beyond the lottery center's walls. She was no mere winner. She was Uzoamaka Okoye, a venture capitalist whose sharp mind had always seen potential where others saw risk. With her billion-dollar fortune, she poured resources into startups that others overlooked. Renewable energy firms harnessing solar winds, AI ventures decoding human health, healthcare innovators serving forgotten communities. Her investments were not gambles, but acts of faith, each one a brick in a new world she was building. Her name began to echo in boardrooms, her stakes in multinational corporations growing, her influence a quiet tide reshaping industries. Yet her wealth was not her legacy. It was the means to a greater end, a tool to amplify voices silenced by prejudice. In Charlotte's heart, Uzo founded Trust Forward, a nonprofit that became her true calling. Housed in a modest office with windows overlooking the city's skyline, the program was a beacon for minority entrepreneurs, offering training in financial literacy, leadership, and resilience. The classrooms buzzed with young dreamers, men and women whose names and skin had barred them from opportunity, their eyes alight with the same fire Uzo carried. She stood before them, her tailored suit a symbol of her journey, her voice a clarion call. "Your worth is not in their eyes," she told a room of rapt faces, "but in the dreams you dare to build." Her words were not platitudes, but truths forged in her crucible, each one a spark igniting courage in her students. One evening, as the city's lights flickered to life, a 22-year-old named Aisha lingered after class, her braided hair catching the glow of the setting sun. She approached Uzo, her voice trembling but resolute. "Your story gave me the courage to walk into a bank and know my worth," she said, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I wasn't afraid, not because they'd approve my loan, but because I knew I deserved to be there." Uzo's throat tightened, her heart swelling with a joy deeper than any prize. In Aisha's words, she heard the echo of her defiance, the ripple of a movement she had set in motion. The room, now empty, seemed to hum with possibility, its walls bearing witness to lives transformed by the simple act of being seen. Trust Forward grew, its classes overflowing with students from Charlotte's margins, Black, Latino, Asian, each one carrying dreams too long deferred. Local businesses took notice, offering partnerships, while community leaders sought Uzo's counsel, her wisdom a bridge between hope and action. She led by example, sharing her story not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience. Her beauty and strength a living rebuke to those who had doubted her. The lottery center's reforms, though significant, were but a footnote in her mission, a single step in a journey to dismantle the barriers that had once sought to break her. Uzo walked through Charlotte's streets, her heels a steady rhythm, her eyes fixed on the future. The wound of that day at the counter lingered, a scar beneath her success, but it fueled her purpose. She was building a world where no one would be dismissed, where every dreamer could claim their place without fear. As she passed a mural of the city's skyline, its colors bold against the dusk, she felt a quiet certainty. Her billion-dollar victory was not the end, but the beginning of a transformation that would echo far beyond her own story. A fire that would burn until justice was no longer a dream, but a reality. The Charlotte Convention Center gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, its vast ballroom a sea of polished suits and expectant faces. The Charlotte Business Summit, a gathering of the city's elite, thrummed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of ambition and expensive cologne. Uzo Okoye stood backstage, her tailored black dress a striking silhouette, its sleek lines accentuating her radiant beauty. Her deep brown skin caught the light, her eyes alight with a quiet fire, her presence a testament to a journey forged in defiance. She was no longer just the woman who claimed a $1 billion lottery ticket. She was a venture capitalist, a philanthropist, the founder of Trust Forward, and now the keynote speaker poised to address a room that included those who had once sought to erase her. The weight of her mission pressed against her chest, but her resolve was a beacon, guiding her toward this moment. The stage awaited, its polished wood gleaming under spotlights, a platform for truths too long unspoken. Uzo smoothed her dress, her fingers steady, and took a deep breath, the murmur of the crowd a distant tide. She had declined countless media interviews, refusing to let her story be reduced to a headline. But this was different. This was a chance to speak directly to the heart of Charlotte's power, to challenge its biases, to plant a seed that could reshape its soul. The MC's voice boomed, cutting through the hum. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Uzoamaka Okoye, CEO and founder of Trust Forward. The applause was thunderous, a wave that carried her forward as she stepped into the light, her heels clicking with purpose, her gaze sweeping the room. The audience was a tapestry of influence, executives, entrepreneurs, civic leaders. Yet Uzo's eyes found familiar faces in the crowd. Near the front, Daniel Harper, the Lottery Center director, sat upright, his charcoal suit crisp, his expression a mix of pride and lingering guilt. In the back, Penelope Penny Whitaker stood, her blonde hair loose, her once arrogant demeanor softened by shame, now a volunteer at a community center. Beside her, Rachel, her former colleague, clutched a notepad, her face earnest, transformed into a diversity advocate after her suspension. Their presence was a silent acknowledgement of Uzo's impact, a testament to the ripples her stand had sent through their lives. Yet Uzo felt no vindication, only purpose, her heart set on a greater goal. She adjusted the microphone, its cool metal grounding her, and let the room fall silent. The weight of expectation a palpable force. The chandelier's light danced across her face, her beauty a quiet command, her voice clear and resonant when she spoke. Today, I ask you a simple question, she began, her words deliberate, each one a pebble in a still pond. The audience leaned forward, their breaths held, as if sensing the gravity of what was to come. How would our world change if we trusted one another from the very first moment we meet? The question hung in the air, simple yet profound, a challenge that pierced the room's polished veneer, striking at the core of every soul present. A hush fell, deeper than silence, as if the walls themselves absorbed her words. Daniel bowed his head, his hands clasped tightly, the memory of his center's failure, a scar he still carried. Penny's eyes glistened, a tear escaping as she recalled the ID she'd tossed, the disdain that had cost her everything. Rachel scribbled furiously, her pen trembling, her transformation rooted in the shame of her laughter that day. The audience stirred, a ripple of introspection, their faces reflecting flickers of guilt, hope, and revelation. Uzo stood still, letting the question settle, its weight sinking into hearts long hardened by habit and hierarchy. Her beauty, her strength, her very presence were a living answer to her own query, a testament to what trust could unleash. She continued, her voice steady but warm, weaving a vision of a world unbound by prejudice. Trust is not blind, she said, her eyes sweeping the room. But it is brave. It sees worth where others see doubt, potential where others see risk. She spoke of Trust Forward, of the young entrepreneurs she'd empowered, of Aisha, who walked into a bank unafraid, her worth no longer a question. The audience listened, rapt, their applause soft at first, then swelling into a roar, a tidal wave of support that shook the chandeliers. Uzo's question had become a mirror, forcing each listener to confront their own biases, their own silences, their own failures to trust. As she stepped from the stage, Daniel approached, his eyes sincere. "Your words didn't just change me," he said, his voice low. "They changed the center, the city, maybe more." Uzo nodded, her smile kind but resolute. "We all have the power to begin," she replied, her words a quiet charge. Penny lingered nearby, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "Thank you," her tears a silent apology. Rachel clasped Uzo's hand, her eyes fierce with purpose, her notepad filled with plans to amplify Uzo's message. The room buzzed with a new energy, conversations sparking, commitments forming, as if Uzo's question had lit a fuse. Outside, Charlotte's skyline glittered, its lights a constellation of possibility. Uzo walked through the convention center's halls, her heels a steady rhythm, her heart brimming with peace. Her question, how would our world change if we trusted one another from the first moment, was no longer hers alone. It echoed in the minds of those she'd touched, from Daniel's reform policies to Penny's redemption, from Rachel's advocacy to the countless entrepreneurs inspired by Trust Forward. The summit had been a spark, igniting a movement that would ripple through boardrooms, communities, and hearts. Uzo's story, once a tale of humiliation, had become a beacon, proving that one woman's courage could challenge a city's soul and demand a world where trust was the first instinct, not the last. What an incredible journey Uzo's story has been. Her courage and question, how would our world change if we trusted one another from the first moment? Leave us all with something to ponder. What did this story spark in you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how Uzo's triumph inspired you. A huge thank you for joining us today, for sharing this moment, and for being part of our storytelling community. Don't miss out on more inspiring tales. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next video.